Welcome to the Western Pacific. My name is Steve Hayes. A little history before we go on our tour. The Western Pacific ran from San Francisco to Salt Lake City. My layout does that. For them to get into the Bay Area, they had to buy two existing railroads. One was actually called the Western Pacific. That got them in there, but then when they tried to get to the shore, years before, someone had sold the Oakland shoreline to a fellow for $5, so the Central Pacific thought they had it pretty well sewed up. So the WP did a construction at nighttime. They came in with rafts and laid rail and everything, and then the war started. They took it to court, and they determined that this fellow, when he bought that shoreline, he owned to the low tide line. Well, the bay had been filled in and there was no low tide anymore, so that took care of it. Oakland was very happy to see the WP come in because they got their shoreline back from doing that. The WP and the CP, Central Pacific, paralleled one another all the way to Salt Lake City, with a break at Sacramento. So going out of the Bay Area, they paralleled one another. And when they got to Sacramento, the WP headed for the Feather River Canyon. Because what happened was CP, again, fighting these people, they went back to the bankers in New York and got them to set conditions on the Western Pacific. Two of the main conditions were grades could not exceed 1%. Over the Sierra, good luck, right? Worked out pretty good when they did it later for fuel. The other one was there was to be no branches. Well, how do you build a railroad with no branches? That was taken care of many, many years ago. They went into bankruptcy twice, and that erased that. So they could have branches, and the railroad does have branches. They were able to go on to Milpitas. They were able to go to Turlock with a branch. They had another branch, what's called the High Line, or the Northern California Extension, that went up to Beaver, and a couple other smaller branches that are rather insignificant. But anyway, over the years, they were able to do that. My railroad is geographically correct. It does follow that exactly from San Francisco to Salt Lake City. I built the railroad and designed the house and the railroad at the same time. This is a very good way to do it, because when I was designing the house upstairs and the wife said, I would like to see the kitchen a little wider. And I said, okay, what would you like? 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot? Because guess what got bigger downstairs at the same time? So that solved a lot of those problems. I started it in 1996, built it. Started the railroad actually while the construction of the house was going on. We'd get too warm upstairs working in the sun. I would come down here, and I started building the helix that's down going to Turlock. My railroad is based upon 1967 as a year. That's the last year that the WP had the orange and silver locomotives. But those of you that know anything about railroading will spot newer cars all over the layout. On my railroad, what I like goes on the railroad. I'm not a stickler for time zoning or anything like that. The operating system is the CMRI, which is the Computer Model Railroad Interface, the CHUB system. It's a progressive system through the computer. It assigns the blocks ahead of you or behind you, depending on the direction that you're going. The reason I did that was back in '96, nobody had won the Battle of the DCC, and I was afraid to go with one system. Plus, you'll see later, I wanted full signaling and a full dispatcher system, and the CHUB system works out just perfect for that. There's about 6 buildings on the railroad that are historically correct. I'll point those out as we go along. So I think for now, what we ought to do is go to San Francisco and get a start. San Francisco was milepost 0. At first, service was provided by ferries for both passengers and freight, though freight was minimal due to SP's early footprint. Plus, San Francisco was really not a large freight producer. In 1934, for some reason, the WP moved all passenger service to the SP Mole. In 1938, the Bay Bridge, which had the SP, Sac Northern, and the Key system running across it, spelled the end of ferry service for the WP. But they held out until 1958 when SP actually closed the Mole. The WP then contracted with Greyhound to move passengers from San Francisco to Oakland, where they would board the trains. This is Oakland Yard. It has 7 industries. The operator here makes up and breaks up 9 trains. We rented the California Zephyr for part of the trip up to Sacramento anyway. It's all we could afford. The historical depot here at Oakland is the 3rd Street Depot that still exists. It was built in 1909 by the Ransom Company of Oakland. Mr. Ransom patented the first process for making cement. He named it Portland cement after some place in England. He also designed the first commercial concrete mixer. What he also did was he would get the frayed cables from the cable cars in San Francisco and put them in his concrete forms as reinforcing, and from that he was able to patent rebar that we know today. As we come out of Oakland and we come around the corner and we're heading toward Fruitvale. When I was down at Fruitvale taking pictures, all of a sudden it dawned on me that guess what was there? Bart. Oh man, I don't want Bart in here. But at 67, Bart was there. So I thought, well, okay, I'll show it as under construction. Okay, so that's what I did. There's a tree there and the track kind of goes down there and stops. The story is that somebody important peed on that tree once. And now it's a heritage tree, and the Oakland people don't want it torn down. So they're in discussions with Bart. What I did was I contacted via email Bart and told him what I was doing. They searched around in their engineering department and found a model railroader, and he took plans for Bart and reduced them in size and sent them to me. So I put it under construction, and if you look on out where it's going, you'll see that it's in partial steps. When you came out of Castro Valley into the Bay Area on Highway 50, what you saw was those gas tanks and Montgomery wards. They were dominant. That's what you saw. Ransom Company demolished those tanks when they built the Oakland Coliseum. So we come around the corner and we come to Montgomery wards. The city of Oakland sued the city of Oakland over the Montgomery Wards building. The Heritage Department wanted to keep the building. The schools wanted the land. So I went by one day and they had it all draped in canvas and they were sandblasting it. So I went inside and took some pictures, and I was so excited that they're going to save the building. 2 weeks later I came down and the building was gone. What they were doing was they were sandblasting the old paint off of it so that the concrete was not hazardous material. My friend Kermit Paul and I would design up how I wanted it, and he cut the building out on his computer pneumatic cutter, and that's as far as I've got on it. So our next step was we'll go on into Fruitvale. Not much is happening there. It's one of the places that I haven't done much. So we'll watch for the Zephyr as it comes around. Train will be coming into this part of Fruitvale, and the train's coming down from Salt Lake, and it's called the MDX, and it'll stop here, and we have a little boxcar unloader that my friend Kermit Paul built for me, because I have an American Flyer collection, and it has a baggage car that does that, so he built one for it. As the CC departs Fruitvale, we'll be going up to the Niles Tower, which is where the SP and the WP cross. It's a famous tower. The tower there is temporary. I haven't built the real one yet. And then we'll leave there and we'll go through the beautiful Altamont Pass area and drop into Stockton. above Altamont, we have the fast clock. The reason we have the fast clock is for the Zephyrs. I don't use it for anything else, but it's so that when the Zephyr leaves Oakland at 8 o'clock, it gets to Salt Lake at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and technically it's 2 days later. So we use a fast clock that goes 4 to 1. On each side of that clock, you'll see some switches. And the reason they're there is that some places in Altamont, they can't see the signal because it's facing away from them, so I repeated it up there. We're leaving there, and then we're coming on down into Stockton. Okay, this is the dispatcher center on the WP. The main center in the 60s, 70s was in Sacramento, behind the station. I built this copying an original as best I could. So what you see here is on the top of it is a track plan showing all the sidings. I control the sidings, the switches to the sidings I control, and I control the signals, okay? We can see that I've got a train sitting in Thornton. That's the California Zephyr right now that I've held him. Dispatcher has total control over the railroad. You can see over here there's 2 trains coming, and they are coming toward one another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a meet and a pass here in Fruitvale. So what I do is I'm going to take the westbound train, I'm going to take into the siding. So I turn the switch there and I turn the switch here. This lights up the signal going that way. This tells me that the switch has been thrown. I push a code button and you can see it changed. It shows down here that there's a green signal going westbound. It shows the turnout is thrown. Unique to the Western Pacific Railroad, the signals are up here. You can see it's a low green that tells me that that train is going into the siding. I want this train to keep going on the main, so I don't throw the switch. All I do is throw the signal and set the signal. Okay? While they're coming, you watch these yellow lights. This one will go down in here, this one will light up there. I want that train to keep going, so I will throw the turnout to go out. I'll throw the switch for the turn there. I want this train to keep going, so I throw that. Now what I've done is I've lined up the meet, but I did not touch the code button, so nothing changed out there. So we'll watch that and we'll see all of a sudden the lights light up and it tells me where those trains are. She just came into the siding, okay? So I can go ahead and throw this now because I know that train is clear of it. And I do that, and it's lined for the other train to keep going. There he goes. He's in there now.
Clear turnout.
Clear the turnout, so I can push this button, and the turnout throws, and the other train can proceed, and that train there can proceed. I can call by pushing a button here. You can hear that. I'm calling Sacramento and telling him when he answers.
Sacramento.
Hi, Sacramento. You're going to have a Zephyr coming in pretty soon, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here we are at Sacramento. The depot there is actually existing now. It's known as the Spaghetti Factory. Just built that in the last month or so. The switcher here is doing some work, I see. So the dispatcher is holding the Zephyr out of town because we're crossing the main. And he kind of snuck ahead of the Zephyr. Since our Zephyr is a extra, it's not a regular passenger run. As soon as he gets there, the local man will throw the turnout on the train, and then the Zephyr will be able to come on in. We're going to tie the Zephyr up here, and we're going to change over to the Zephyrette, which is an RD6 or 5 or something like that. And those things actually ran from Oakland all the way to Salt Lake And people would tell you that the stagecoach was smoother. But they're a cool little thing. Would have been a kick in the butt to ride it. We've pulled the Zephyr out up to alongside the Zephyr, California Zephyr, and the people that are with our tour that's going on to Salt Lake are jumping out of there and getting over onto there. We will depart here from Sacramento and we'll go through the Tower Bridge. One of the things you'll notice on the Tower Bridge is the two red lights up there. Those are actually the signals for a train coming westbound, because he couldn't see it, right? The signals below you can see, I can see those. So that's another trick that you have to pull when you start signaling a model railroad. Might want to mention that this is battery operated. It's DCC on batteries. See, the signal just turned red to tell you that he's in the block ahead. Up here is a manifest that's for the Reno turn. We use JMRI. It's a computer-generated system that knows where every industry on the railroad is and what type of cars that it takes. It also knows what cars are sitting at that industry. And you push a button and say, I want to make up this train, and it goes beep, and it makes it up. And what it does, it goes through the whole layout looking for a place for the cars to either be picked up or dropped off at that industry, and it makes up that train. And we make up, I think it's 14 trains that I make up. This takes probably all of 10 minutes to generate it. Then you print it out, bring it down here. If you look at it, the blue is what he is starting out with, and when he comes to a town, it tells him in blue what he should be picking up at that town. The red is what he should be dropping off at that town. Online, when he's going, like if he pulls into Thornton down here, there's no operator there, so he has to set out the cars and pull the cars himself. When he pulls into like Sacramento here, there's an operator here that will have already got those cars dug out. He will drop off his cars, pick up the cars that are going, and continue on his way. So right next to it, we have the switch list for here, for Sacramento. Same thing. But what it does here is he's listing every train that's going to come through here, what he's going to drop off, and what you're supposed to put on him. Okay, and then on the right-hand side at the bottom in black is his local moves that he'll move a few things around here. One of the things that I've done to modernize the system a little bit is like in Oakland and Salt Lake, when I go to print it out, I take it over to Word and I take all the inbound cars off of his lists. So basically all he has on his list is blue, which is going out on each train. I did that so that it's not as confusing to him, number one, and it's prototypical because when a train pulls into Oakland, he hands this manifest to the Oakland guy and it tells him where to put the cars, just like they do on the real railroad. We've been using it now for about 3 years for our operating sessions. Oh, I see up above coming into Ketty is a freight coming down from Salt Lake. On my railroad, there's only one place where operators work on a second deck, and that's over at Orville, which we'll see pretty quick. The rest of it is you don't do any operations. The railroad was supposed to stop here at Ketty, and it was supposed to be a staging yard up there, but I went back east and saw a guy that had done that, and I don't want to deal with that. So we continued on with the railroad, which you'll see in a little while. This is my representation of the Ketty Y. It should be about 2.5 times larger, but I didn't want to donate that much space to it. It's the holy grail of Western Pacific guys, so I have a lot of fun with that when they come up and they kind of look at it and they kind of shake their head and I go, hey, the only reason the Ketty Y is there is I ran into the wall and I had to go both ways, so I put it in there. First bridge we come to down the hill is called the North Fork Bridge. When the government built Oroville Dam, they had to relocate the railroad by 12 miles. And they crossed the North Fork, the Feather River back there, and built this beautiful bridge that very few people have ever seen because it's a hiker's bridge. As we leave that bridge, we go into a loop. The WP actually had a loop called the Williams Loop, just like Tehachapi, but it did not get the press that the Tehachapi gets, but it's still there. So we go around that loop, and it was basically to maintain that 1% we talked about earlier. We come around the corner, and we come to the Highway 70 bridge. What that was two pieces of wood, U-shaped, glued together, and then I had to drill holes through it to make it with that pattern. And when it got done, it would not hold a locomotive. You'd go across it, and you could see it trying to sag, and it was cool because it transferred all the way down, just like a regular bridge should. So then what I did, of course, was I put a piece of aluminum across it, gave it the strength that it needed.
The Zephyrette meets the westbound train we've been following in Oroville. As the Zephyrette traverses Williams Loop and the two bridges we just saw, we'll hear from Steve about the computer that controls the layout.
This is the area underneath Niles. There's 3 of these. There's one here, there's one underneath the Ketty, and there's one out at Salt Lake. This is the operating system for the Chubb system. If you look at that, you'll see a couple rows of black relay boards with green lights on them. What those are is each block in the railroad is one of those, and it has 7 relays on it for 7 different trains. Okay? Above it, you see the little red dots. That's the detectors. That earlier we were showing you the detection on the dispatcher's board. That's what's detecting where a train is at. Way down at the bottom, the gray ones, that's basically the turnouts. So through the Chubb system, we can turn the turnouts with 1 digit instead of 2. Off to the left, you see some I/O boards. That's for, if you push a button, that's an input. Tells the computer you push the button, and it tells an output board to light the light, or whatever you're doing. Off to the right of that, you will see a whole thing of wires and things. That's all the signaling system. So that's tied into there too. And we have the computer. The computer is just an old computer running on DOS and something else. I forget what they call that. I'm not a computer person. But that's the heart of this railroad. And we're quite proud of it, but we kind of chuckle because one of the selling points for this is a minimum amount of wiring. Oh, yeah. The railroad was originally to terminate up there at Ketty. It was going to be a staging yard up there, which all you'd do is pull a train in, pull a train out. But then I went back to Bruce Chubb's back in Wisconsin, and he actually had 3 staging yards up in the air that you actually had to get up on a ladder to get to. And I thought, that doesn't work. So I thought, well, okay, I'll extend the railroad and get into this room next door where we were, where San Francisco is. So I did this, and then we pulled into that area, and at that time we called it Portola, and it was a staging yard basically. So the trains just went to there. Okay, we're here in Reno, and I just thought it would be a good time to kind of demonstrate what we're doing here with the battery-operated locomotives. This is a DC-operated locomotive on batteries. So we'll just take this board here, and we'll just set the board up there. And we'll take the train up here, and we'll put the train there. And we'll go... So it doesn't need track, it doesn't need wiring, it doesn't need anything but a battery. It's been a heaven send for my railroad. They're very reliable. All the commands are through the air. They're not through the track. The power is in the battery, not through the track. What I have done is, like it here, this track is 12 volts on all the time. So this engine, while he's working here, is charging. The minute he leaves here, he's on full battery. I've got 13 of them up now that we're running on, and have been very, very happy. It's called SCab. You can see that there's a steam special running out of Salt Lake. The Zephyrette's just coming down the hill toward it. They're going to meet at Cliffside. I put that steam engine is battery operated with sound, the only sound on the railroad at this time. You can see him going through Cliffside, and one time when the fellow was here that was a WP engineer, and he was standing here the longest time, and I finally asked him, I said, "What are you just looking at? What did I do wrong?" And he said, "I'm reminiscing." He said, "I spent many hours just looking out of the cab of the locomotive at this scene that you've created here," which is kind of neat. You can see the foliage and stuff that I used. It's a product that I started on it and ran out of it, so I tried to buy it, and it had been outlawed because of the asbestos in it. So I went online and said, anybody that ever sees a bag or a box at its show, I'll buy it. And pretty soon boxes started showing up here, and one guy wrote and said, "Here, you could have it all. I would never put this on my railroad." So I contacted him and said, "Why?" And he says, "It molds." Well, back east with the humidity, it molds. Well, our tour of the Western Pacific ends up here at Salt Lake. A little story about Salt Lake is, as I said earlier, we terminated at Portola, and I took my wife down to Kermit Paul's a couple times, and he had a beautiful cityscape. And she said, "Well, why don't we have a city?" And I said, "Well, I have no place to really put a city. Why don't we have a city?" "Okay, I'll check into it." So I was sitting in the other room there one day, and I thought, if I cut a hole in that wall and went outside, I could actually build a room out there, and we could have Salt Lake. So that's what I did. I built this little room out here, and started building Salt Lake. It was interesting because Norma came down and she was painting the backdrops. She painted part of the wall. I would start putting up bench work, and I was just kind of following her along. Well, she got back here in the back corner, and as you can see the detail, I said, "Hon, you don't have to detail. It's all going to be covered with these big buildings." "Well, you do not tell a painter what to do." So she continued doing her thing, so I just kind of went to the railroad and did something else. And at one point, I finally went behind me and started bringing it around the corner, which looks terrible. And the next time she came down and saw that, she said, "Well, you don't need a painter." And she left. And I went, "Okay, you don't do that to painters." So she'll come down here one of these days and get back to finishing it. So there's an operator down here that makes up 2 trains and receives 2 trains, same way as the other places. And it's a neat little yard to operate. So want to thank you guys for putting up with what we were trying to do here to show you what the railroad is. We've never done any recordings or anything like that before. So this was exciting, and I want to thank John and his wife for coming up here and doing this, and we'll be able to share it with the rest of the world, I guess. So thank you very much, and have a good day, folks.
There is one problem though. You did walk right in front of the camera.
Did I really?
When you did that, yeah. So
I'm sorry.
we probably should redo that.